One thing I find fascinating about media is just how much trends and popular ideas change over time, with one of those elements being genres. It's interesting to see which genres or subgenres dominate different time periods. The 80s was a time ruled by rock here in the States, but was also among one of the decades where mecha anime was top dog. The 2000s were ruled by shonen battle anime, with the 2010s and 2020s are being taken over by superhero movies. And that of course leads into the topic of today's video, the ever popular Isekai genre. It's been absolutely dominating anime season after season, year after year. You can hardly go a few seconds of scrolling through the new list of anime in each season before seeing like 8 of them. And they've been really popular too, even the trashy ones, getting lots of attention and buzz and praise throughout many different communities. It's been going on long enough to clearly not just be a trend or a fad. But will it last forever? The short answer is no. Isekai will eventually be more on the sidelines as far as anime genres go. I know, not that interesting of an answer, but the reasoning why. Now that is the interesting part. First off, it's important to explain how and why Isekai became popular in the first place. Sword Art Online, or SAO, is often credited for really getting the ball rolling on this idea. Yeah, there were anime before this that really touched upon the idea of being sent or trapped in another world, but 2012 Sword Art Online is definitely what got this idea popular, at least to big budget writers. Art and fantasy has always been a form of escapism for many folks, a way to get away from the 9-to-5s, the bills, the taxes, the drama. That's been the appeal of video games for many people, and animation is no different. This has particularly been true of fantasy, which is clear with the rise in popularity of tabletop RPGs, just as our society continues to crumble right before our very eyes. So people often fantasize about being whisked away to another world where they get to be the hero, to save everyone, and even find an exotic form of love. It invokes on the need to feel valid and important that many of us are sorely lacking, and that is why Isekai is so popular. SAO played upon this with a popular format of escapism in video games, and this laid the groundwork for future series to go even further with it. And boy, did they, as the genre quickly grew in popularity and has continued to dominate seasonal lineups. It almost seems invincible. It's such a simple setup that is a jumping off point for just about any story one would want to tell. So why do I think it'll eventually fade away? Maybe not completely gone, but I do genuinely think that its explosive popularity will recede into something more moderate sometime in the future, and there's a lot of evidence backing me up on this. If you remember, I gave a few examples of previous hyper-popular genres in other forms of media, be they main or subgenres. Let's look at rock, at least here in the United States. While the genre has been popular for many decades and continues to be so, it was arguably at the height of its popularity in the 1980s and 1990s, at least when you think of hard rock and metal instead of like rock and roll like Elvis did, which drew more inspiration from blues music than modern interpretations do. It was everywhere, dominating radio stations with bands popping up left and right. Boston, Journey, Aerosmith, Def Leppard, AC/DC, Kiss, ZZ Top. There is a crazy number of these bands. And so many subgenres and styles were born during these decades, as it led to the birth of metal with Metallica, Judas Priest, and Megadeth being some of the pioneers of that genre. It really can't be understated just how big rock music was in the United States back in the day. When thinking of classic music, one of these bands will likely come to an American's mind at some point. But nowadays, though it isn't forgotten, the genre has been overshadowed by the popularity of rap and pop music, even going overseas with K-pop and J-pop. But let's say that's not a good enough example for you. It's music, not animation. Totally different. If you want something closer to home, let's look at shonen battle or mecha anime. Both were widely popular and highly marketable genres of anime, being incredibly influential to the anime industry and pop culture. Dragon Ball Z and Gundam are two of the most important animated series in history because of how much influence they've had even decades after their release, and they're both still getting series. Though the genres they pioneered are a bit of a shell of what they used to be, mecha much more so than shonen battle. For a while, the mecha genre even seemed to be dead. Thanks, Darling and the Franxx, for making it worse. But series like 86, SSSS Xenon, boy that's a mouthful, and the newest Gundam, The Witch from Mercury, show that it still has some life in it. And I believe that Isekai will likely go the way of shonen battle instead of mecha, getting a popular and pivotal series every so often, but it won't be nearly as prevalent. And I think we're already seeing signs of that. They just aren't obvious. Because I didn't really discuss why these genres became less popular, and that reason is overexposure. Not only were they crammed into people's faces so often, but because genres like rock music or shonen battle were so popular, they were also one of the only things creators wanted to make. The genres became so oversaturated by fluff, many of the new entries being so similar to other ones. Rock music almost began to get tedious as new bands seemed to follow the same notes and ideas that older bands had already thought of years before, without adding anything new or fun, to the point where new subgenres like alternative rock and grunge rock became more popular later on. And shonen battle was a bit similar to this, because even though we love to talk about Naruto or One Piece, or even slightly less popular series like Soul Eater and Fairy Tail, who among you remembers Zatch Bell? And would you really know what Shaman King was if it wasn't getting a new series? So many of these shows just went under the radar, either because they didn't get popular because other series were popular, or because they were garbage and repetitive, not doing anything new with the genre, and only being made because that genre was popular. And that's happening with Isekai. Or at least it's starting to. One thing that has worked in the genre's favor and allowed it to flourish so well for this long, in an admittedly more obscure art form, is its open-endedness. The only requirement for Isekai is that at least one character goes to a world that isn't their own. That's it. It allows for just about any kind of story or character idea to work, so creators have been doing just about everything and anything they can with it. And it's starting to show. While I don't think creators are running out of ideas just yet, the ideas are getting a lot crazier. Now, I'm not judging the quality of the product in any way, but a recent legitimate Isekai series had the premise of the main hero getting reincarnated as a sentient sword. Again, not judging, but that's a bit out there. Other recent ideas revolve around cooking, wrestling, or just living a normal life in a new fantasy world. While not bad in any way, the original idea of Isekai is really getting stretched. After all, it was just kind of a power fantasy, and it's beginning to reach the limit of new ideas that can be done with it. Plus, we're already seeing the recycling of tropes that are specific to Isekai, like a main hero being granted incredible powers by an otherworldly being, harem upon harem of rainbow-haired girls, video game-esque world mechanics, and the evil churches, though in all fairness that last one is a long-running trope of JRPGs and has a pretty interesting origin in Japanese culture. The more you know. Though new tropes are being formed as the genre branches out more and more, like being reborn as a monster, even those ones are being repeated. Even though the genre is incredibly popular and has been throwing out new things just when people think it might start to get stale, I think it's eventually going to reach that point of running out of new ideas, and will be stale more consistently. Soon it'll go the way of other hyper-popular genres before it, and fade out of the limelight due to overexposure and oversaturation. But the question is, what comes next? What is the next big thing after the Isekai bubble inevitably pops? Honestly, I think it's kinda hard to tell. Isekai itself seemingly came out of nowhere, so it could be something like that, something that none of us expect. Or it could just be an old genre that all of us have discarded and suddenly making a grand return. After all, regular fantasy has been growing steadily in popularity, and we're finally getting more anime about fantasy that don't involve otherworld shenanigans. It's just really hard for me to tell what comes next. It could be anything, so I honestly don't have an answer. As far as Isekai goes, yes, it will eventually fade away, just like many other genres in the past. Even though it is popular and has given us incredible series after incredible series, it too will eventually have to go to another world. If you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click that subscribe button, and if you want to be notified for future content, also go ahead and click that bell as well. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.